All right, hey Ruckus Makers. I'm here with Darrin Peppard, who's a leadership expert focused on organizational culture and climate and coaching growing emerging leaders. Darrin's the author of the book Road to Awesome: Empower, Lead, Change the Game. He's also the host of the Leaning into Leadership podcast. And as a recovering high school principal, Darrin shares strategies and lessons learned that helped him be effective from over 25 years in public ed to help leaders to be effective in their roles and positively impact the world around them. Darrin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Danny. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, this is going to be great. And, you were super generous and had me on your podcast. And here we are able to do a little podcast swap and have you on as well. So make sure, again, check out Darrin's work. The Road to Awesome stuff is great. So yeah, let's start with your story. You left the classroom, you returned to your home state, and you landed in a toxic culture. Tell us that story.
Yeah, it's interesting when I left my teaching position. So I taught in the classroom in Arizona for 11 years, and just really, we wanted to go back home. My home state is Wyoming, and I was ready to, make that leap, I guess, from being a classroom teacher and a coach to being an administrator. And I didn't know it was a toxic culture, and I don't think any of us really did. But we discovered, just I guess through finally taking a look at ourselves and maybe we're doing a little bit of self-reflection, and definitely, I'll tell you a story about a staff meeting in a second, but we were really good at catching people doing things wrong. And that's what we were all about. That whole like punishment to gain compliance type of leadership style. Yeah. That's who we were. And, partway through my first year, we're in that staff meeting. That staff meeting so many people have, the one where, you're trying to solve those big issues, like what are you doing about hats and what are you doing about cell phones? And, somebody raised a hand and said, man, Darrin, why is it always got to be about what to do wrong? Why can't it be about what to do right? And I think for me, that was that moment when I realized that our culture was pretty toxic, that, we weren't celebrating all the great things. We were just, busy being the hammer and letting our kids be the nail.
Yeah. So it sounds like, that staff meeting was the light bulb moment for you. And here you are in the staff member. Why aren't we catching them what they're doing right and celebrating that? So, what would you say to a ruckus maker, watching or listening to the show? I assume that they're not that kind of leader, but maybe they are dealing with that, right? And if they are, how can schools practically see and hear and love and celebrate their students?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think every leader should, take that moment to, I guess, take a step back or take a step up onto the balcony. When we're busy, leading our schools each and every day, we really get, deep into the weeds, and we have a tendency to kind of lose sight of what we're doing, in terms of what are those main goals. So jump up on the balcony and maybe kind of take a look, and then you'll realize, where are you spending your time and what is it that you're really shining the spotlight on? As far as, how do you go about celebrating and recognizing those incredible things? You start with what you're looking for. A simple way to think about it is, Danny, next time you're out in your car, just count the number of red cars you see as you're driving along. Yeah, you're going to find a lot of them, and it's simply because that's what you're looking for. So start, really training your mind to look for the great things in your school, and then just find those simple ways to recognize, reward, and reinforce that. It could be, celebrating, the great things that kids are doing academically, behaviorally, attendance, those types of things at, some type of an academic pep rally. Do a pep rally like you do for athletics, but celebrate those other things instead. You keep doing the athletic stuff. The athletic stuff's awesome. They've got it figured out. But do some of those same types of things, instead of certificates for kids, certificates just go in a drawer. come up with something that's like visible or tangible, a shirt or, a wristband or, maybe I'm actually right now working on my blog post for today, and it's, ways to celebrate and say thank you. And so we used to do a barbecue. We did it once a month. We did a barbecue for all our kids that, were meeting certain targets or, positive referrals, those kinds of things. So, talk to your kids. I mean, that's the bottom line. You want to know how your kids want to be celebrated, talk to them. Actually ask them.
Yeah. We've had a lot of mastermind members have success with good news calls of the day, and I think that's what you're talking about, right? This culture of celebration. And I love that you're talking about, just give them tangible things too. And to move past just athletics, like there's so many different ways that students exhibit their brilliance. I just want to highlight Doc Chris Jones, who's viewing right now, and definitely a ruckus maker who listens to the podcast. He said compliance encourages resistance, and I think I would agree with that. There's a part of my book that talks about expectations versus agreements, right? But anything you want to add in terms of Doc's comment here that compliance encourages resistance?
Yeah, I really appreciate what Chris is saying there, because to me, compliance is like the enemy of innovation. If we are focused only on compliance, we're not going to have people who are being innovative and creative in their classroom, and our kids aren't necessarily going to take risk because our teachers won't take risk. In those cultures of compliance, it's like people will, function and perform at a level just north of that which would get them punished. So, we definitely want to move in that direction where we're encouraging people to take a risk and take a chance and, be willing to do some things different. And then you celebrate that, really celebrate those people for taking chances and doing things cool in our classroom. I mean, that's what being a ruckus maker is all about. You can't,
that's right.
You can't make a ruckus if you can't take a risk.
No, I mean, it's investing in your continuous growth, challenging the status quo, which is inherently risky, and designing the future school now. Like, why wait? And the one thing I want to add too, like back to this like compliance riff and expectations riff we're having too. Here's the thing, especially when it comes to resistance, right? Viewers, listeners, like think for a moment, like honestly investigate your own experience. When you have expectations or you're pushing people to be compliant, how do you feel when they violate, that expectation? You're upset, right? Now, how do you feel if they actually meet the expectation or they are quote unquote compliant? Do you throw a party for them? Do you high five them? No, you just think to yourself, oh, they're just doing their job, right? So it's a lose-lose situation. That's why agreements are so much better, and a culture of celebration is so much better, because when it's sort of an organic and bottom-up and collaborative process, if people say this is, how I'm going to add more value, they're thrilled to make that the reality. And that's really how you build a remarkable school, a remarkable culture. Another way you can do it is have a leadership coach. And I know you had an executive leadership coach as a principal. Yeah. Tell us, Darrin, like, what did you learn from that experience having a coach?
Man, Danny, it was a game changer. It really was. That.
Yeah, sure.
Holy cow! So I became the principal in the same school where I'd been an assistant principal, and it was seriously 40 feet from my AP office to the principal's office. So like really short little move down the hallway, and it might as well have been like 400 miles, because when I stepped into that principal role, and I think a lot of principals go through what I went through. Darrin Peppard sat at the interview table, and Darrin Peppard was offered the job, and then Darrin Peppard thought, oh, now I have to be Superman. I have to do it all, right? But they didn't interview or hire Superman. They interviewed me. But I was convinced, for whatever reason, that I had to like have all the answers, and I had to solve everybody's problems and all this. And before I knew it, man, that first year, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I say I was breathing through a snorkel, but I probably was full on scuba gear for most of the year, because my head was just totally below water. And year two, I was able to work with an executive leadership coach, and man, I'll never forget the first time he was at my school. That whole morning was just 8 teachers needed me right away, and my secretary needed me, and I had a group of angry parents, and I had bunches of stuff on my pushpin board. And in administration, we just call that Monday. But my my leadership coach, when I'm like working my way through all this stuff, and
Yeah.
then I turned around, he wasn't there, and my secretary's like, "Yeah, he's in room 318. Grab a notepad." He said, "Get down there." And I went, and he's doing walkthroughs. I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing?" I mean, I got all this stuff, and he pulled me aside, and Danny, this is what the leadership coaching is all about. He said something I'll never forget. He just looked at me and said, "Darrin, it's time for you to stop being a firefighter and start being a leader. And if you're going to lead, you need to be where the action is. You have plenty of people to help you with all of that. It's not your job to do all of those things. Right. You need to be in classrooms. You need to be with your teachers. You need to be with your kids." It was a game changer. I mean, I could go on and on and on with that story, seriously, but it was a game changer.
Yeah, that's a game changer moment in the fact that, all right, you're not a firefighter, like putting out emergencies all the time, and you should need to be where the action is, be a leader. Just to add a little more, how long did that take to sink in? Like, I know it was a game changing, but then there's like the shift in attitude and beliefs, and then how that shows up in your day-to-day operations. But yeah, if you're willing to share that, I'm just curious.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely happy to go deep into that. It was interesting because, as he said that, and then we continued doing some walkthroughs and that kind of stuff. I mean, my initial thought was, well, we should be, maybe having a cup of coffee and talking about different things. But it was like, no, we need to get into the work, and we need to be doing this on a regular basis. From there, it became, let's start putting some systems in place that ensure that you can go and do that work. And it wasn't just, hey, go do this. We had to build some systems. And it was things like just simply managing my time differently. The leaders I coach now, one of the first things I always talk to them about is, hey, how much do you empower your secretary or your administrative assistant, whatever the title is? Do they have access to your email? Do they have access to your calendar? Are they able to answer questions with authority on certain things? And I learned I would say over the course of that first year working with him, just exactly what were the things that I should be delegating and allowing others to do, and honestly trusting others to do. I mean, again, I thought I had to do it all, fast forward down the road, when I became a superintendent, sitting down with my HR director, she was solving everybody's problems. And it's like, no, we need to start teaching people how to solve their own problems so that you don't have to do everything for them. So it easily took a year for me to get comfortable with that and to feel like, oh, okay, wait, this is something that I need to be delegating to one of my assistant principals, or this is something that, this is our process. I'll give you a simple example. I would walk down a hallway to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And if it was a passing period, Danny, I'd have like 4 or 5 teachers who wanted to talk to me. And I would stop and talk and stop and talk and stop and talk. Well, then I'd be 10 minutes late for where I was supposed to be. A simple system we put in place was I would just tell them, hey, I really want to talk with you, but I'm already scheduled somewhere. Email Marilyn, my secretary. She'll get you on the calendar. You tell her how long you need me, and I will come to you. So then she was empowered to just build that time into my calendar. I would go to that person. So I was saying to them, your time is more valuable than mine. I'm coming to your classroom to talk to you. I'm not going to ask you to come to me. But that system, it took a little bit of time to get comfortable with it. But then the staff just knew. They would just email Marilyn direct, hey, I need 10 minutes with Darrin. Can you get me set up? Sure, absolutely. And I mean, the same thing was true with email. We all get, 200, 300, 400 emails as school leaders.
Yeah.
80% of that I didn't need to respond to, or some of it, you'd get that parent email, and I really wasn't the one who needed to respond to it. They needed to talk to the counselor or talk to a teacher. She just did that for me. She's like, I already know what to do with this. And we met every single day. It's not like
Sure.
she just ran autonomously, but that relationship with her, and the same thing is true with my assistant principals, was so critical. But it took time. It didn't just happen by Tom saying, "Hey, quit being a firefighter." Oh, okay, I'll stop doing that. It didn't work like that. It took time. It really did.
Well, I appreciate you, illustrating some of those points. And one of the key words there is systems, right? So having a system of how you'll generally deal with stuff. Also, one of my favorite words, which is delegation, right? And that's great because you're empowering your team, and like you said, 80% of the emails Marilyn knew how to handle on your behalf. And some of that's through coaching and mentorship, through your daily meeting and all of that, but it's saving you time. And I love that, teachers could get on your calendar, that you'd meet them in their space, right? And really, you're also telling them that I'm going to give you full presence, full attention, right? And they're just not going to get that in a passing period when you got somewhere to be, and they're trying to tell
100%.
you something that's important. So actually, it probably saved a lot of relationships and nurtured a lot of relationships. Because otherwise you're like, oh, okay, I'm pretending to listen, and then you're off and you totally even forgot what they talked about. So yeah, super cool stuff there. Well, let's chat about your book, Road to Awesome.
Sure.
And highly recommend that ruckus makers check that out. Darrin's book, Road to Awesome. It introduces 6 things that are important to leaders. We don't have time to dig in, and go deep on all of them. But can you just give an overview of what those 6 things are right now?
Yeah. So when I first wrote this book, my goal behind putting this book out was to have leaders have an opportunity to really reflect on what matters to them. Again, this goes back to my coaching experience, but I had to understand the importance of clarity, and I had to understand the importance of being intentional with my work. And the first and foremost thing was, you got to be clear about what matters to you. And so for me, it was really important that I was really clear with what the vision of our school was, and that I had to be communicating that all the time. And I needed to be really, really clear about building and maintaining that positive culture and climate in our school. The other ones that are in there as well, I talk about really empowering our students and ensuring that we have high quality, authentic learning experiences for our kids. Talk about really loving and supporting and caring for all of the people who work in our school. I call them staffalty, staff plus faculty. And then I just talked about how important it is for us to be telling the stories of our schools, because if we let somebody else tell our story, we're probably not going to like their version. Exactly. Yep. We have to own it. And then the last one is coaching. Exactly what we're talking about. As a school leader, as the principal, my really, really biggest job was to grow and coach everybody else in that school. Grow and coach my teachers, grow and coach my leaders, grow and coach my support staff, so that we were doing everything we could for kids. Now, an interesting wrinkle, and you and I haven't had a chance to talk about this, but we are actually going to be releasing an updated version of this book shortly after the beginning of the year. So really excited about that. It's still going to be very, very similar with this, but the second edition is going to dive a little deeper into that clarity, into being intentional, and really focusing around what we believe are the 3 primary tenets of traveling the road to awesome, which is, number 1, we focus on the things we can control and let go of what we can't. Number 2, we rise by lifting others. And number 3, as educators, we change the world one conversation at a time. So we are working on that updated edition right now. So that's going to be exciting.
Yeah. And tell us again when's the updated version out?
Just after the start of the year. Yeah, that'll be coming out in January.
Sweet. So people watching now, they can pre-order soon, hopefully, and then folks that listen on the podcast, this will release after the book is revised. So go pick it up. Sweet.
Yeah.
So let's talk about empowering the team. And there's a leader. So shout out to John, one of my favorite ruckus makers for sure. We've worked together in the mastermind and one-on-one. And he's very interested in empowering his team. So I said, I'm going to talk to somebody about that and put it in the podcast. So
Yeah.
can you tell us some ways that have really worked for you when empowering your team?
I think there's two things to really think about when you're empowering your team. Number one, what are the things that they're really good at? What are their strengths? I mean, if we can help people play to their strengths, I think about this, as an athletic coach. I was a basketball coach.
There you go.
Everything we did, it wasn't just, hey, this is my offensive system and that's what we're going to do. My athletes change from year to year, and you want to play to their strengths and try to minimize those things that maybe we're not good at. If I don't have a lot of speed, I'm not going to press. That's just how it is. But when I do have that, maybe that's a direction that I'm going to go. So when you're empowering your team, think about what are the things they're really good at. And honestly, if you've built a good team, they're good at things that maybe you're not. So identifying those things that they're really good at. And then the second thing I would say is, definitely take those things they're good at, but how can you stretch them just a little bit? How can you push them a little bit outside their comfort zone so that they're continuing to grow and getting better at other things, and what happens when it's not just this is what I'm good at, but hey, this is going to stretch me, this is going to push me a little bit, is it increases the ownership that they take in whatever that is that you're helping them or allowing them to take and run with. I think those are just, to me, the two most important things we can do.
Oh, absolutely. And I love the idea of stretching them just a little bit too. It makes me think of zone and proximal development. And,
Yep.
I think a great way to identify what that even is to ask people, right? Like, so what are your goals, right? And you might ask something like, what's an experiment you might like to run, or what would stretch you? And people can think.
Mm-hmm.
Another way that you could frame it is, okay, Darren, so you've accomplished that goal. What's the next one,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Right.
now you might have identified what that stretch goal is too. So love these ideas so much.
Yeah.
And I'm really
Yeah.
enjoying
Well,
our conversation. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it takes us back a little bit to the compliance piece when Chris Jones kind of shared that in there too.
Yeah, yeah.
When we go the opposite direction, when we go with a little bit more of that, being a little bit innovative or being willing to take some risk, when you're doing exactly the work that you talked about, that I talked about, what that does is it gives those individuals the opportunity to start coming to you with ideas. It doesn't just have to be, I like how you said it, that, hey, what's a goal that you'd like to accomplish, or, what are you going to do next? I always like to talk with my team about, what are some, maybe some pain points or some problems of practice that we're having in the building that you feel like you would like to take on.
Yep. Yeah.
Then number one, it's not me having to be the one to lead all of that, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for them to grow, to lead a little bit outside of what their job description is. And I'm not saying, do something as the athletic director within athletics. What are some things outside of, your normal job description that you can do that shows the staff that you're willing to go out and take a risk, that you're willing to work on improving things and overall just making us a better place ultimately for kids. I think that's just huge right there. And when we have people who know they have the opportunity to innovate, or they know they have the opportunity to take a risk, they're going to come forward with those ideas. So it's not even just like our APs. It's, it's other leaders within the building, our
Sure.
teachers,
Yeah.
and sometimes even our kids,
Absolutely. Why not? I mean, they've got tons of great ideas. They can help solve
Yeah.
difficult problems. And so, yeah, often overlooked. Cool. Well, let's get some messages in from the show's sponsors. And when we get back, I would love to just talk really quick about your podcast and then get to the last three questions I ask all my guests. Learn how to successfully navigate change, shape your school's success, and empower your teams with Harvard's certificate in school management and leadership. Get online PD that fits your schedule. Courses include leading change, leading school strategy and innovation, leading people, and leading learning. Apply today at betterleadersbetterschools.com/Harvard. School leaders today know that productive student talk drives student learning, but the average teacher talks 75% of class time. Give your students more opportunities to learn in class by monitoring their talk time. And you can check TeachFX for yourself at teachfx.com/BLBS. Today's show is also proudly sponsored by Organized Binder, a program which gives students daily exposure to goal-setting, reflective learning, time and task management, study strategies, organizational skills, and more. Organized Binder's color-coded system is implemented by the teacher through parallel process with students, helping them create a predictable and dependable classroom routine. You can learn more and improve your students' executive functioning at organizedbinder.com. We're back with Darrin Peppard, and as I mentioned, he has a great podcast, and definitely want Ruckus Makers to check it out. It's called Leaning into Leadership. What's it for, and who's it for, would you say?
This is the podcast that is for today's hardworking leader. Every one of us is out there, doing everything we can to try to improve our schools and to do right by our staff. And sometimes we just need to hear from other leaders, and it's not always just leaders in education. So for me, when we launched Leaning into Leadership in January of 2022, the idea was definitely to have different successful school leaders on to share insight and share ideas. But I've long been a believer that great leadership is great leadership, and it doesn't matter what spaces that it's happening in. So, I've had business leaders on. I had a county sheriff on. One of my favorite episodes. We're actually getting ready to drop episode 47 this coming week as we're recording. Thank you. And we had the county sheriff from Grand County, Colorado, a guy named Brett Schrotlin, led through an absolutely massive wildfire, the second largest wildfire in his state's history, and just the leadership insight from him, what he learned, and pieces with communication, and those are things all of us can learn from. And so I just want every Sunday to drop a little bit of leadership knowledge from somebody who's out there doing it each and every day, and also just to bring a little bit of a smile, bring a little bit of joy. I mean, my whole goal with everything I do is to help leaders, find that clarity to walk in their purpose and to just get back in touch with the joy in their job. And so that's what I try to do with the podcast each and every week.
Yeah, love it. Cool. So check out Leaning into Learning, and it's available, I'm sure, everywhere you can listen to podcasts. And, check out the episode that I did with Darrin as well, which was a whole lot of fun.
Absolutely. It's awesome having you on Leaning into Leadership, man. It was a blast.
Yeah. Oh, did I say Leaning into Learning? I'm sorry if I did. So Leaning into Leadership. Yeah. Cool. If you could put a message, Darrin, on all school marquees around the world for a single day, what would your message read?
It would be find your awesome. Just simply that. Find your awesome. Every one of us is on our own unique journey, and we can't let other people define that journey for us. So whatever it is that is going to lead to your moment of awesome or your world of awesome, that's what I think we should be doing in our schools. So that's what I would want to put on the marquee.
All right. Now let's build your dream school. And if you weren't limited by any resources, your only limitation was your imagination, how would you build your dream school, and what would be the top 3 guiding principles?
Well, I think one of the pieces that would have to go into building that dream school would be to bring lots of different voices to the table. This shouldn't just simply be built by educators for educators. It's got to be, people that are out there in the business space that are also, though, really innovative thinkers. As we look at the world today, the jobs that exist now and the jobs that will exist down the road are so much different than what we're usually preparing kids for, right? So I would say number one, when you think about our priorities in this dream school, it has got to be innovative, and I mean truly innovative. Not, oh, hey, we'll give a kid a computer. That's not innovative anymore. We need to be really looking at something as creative as possible. And to get there, I think that's where my other 2 priorities would come in. Okay. I want kids doing really truly innovative work, like solving real world problems now, working with people in industry, out in the world, being able to actually solve problems. Why should we just be cranking out, some worksheets or doing some things that maybe, solving problems have already been solved. Our kids think so much different. Their brains are just so much more elastic than ours. So why not give them the opportunity to really solve real world problems? And then, maybe the other piece I would say is we've got to be independent from accountability measures that just don't work. Quit measuring me by a standard tape measure, and allow me to measure kids' growth in a way that's actually meaningful, in a way that actually gets them to where they can find their awesome.
Yeah, well, we've covered a lot of ground on this road to awesome, Darrin. And of everything we talked about today, what's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
I briefly touched it, but I want to come back to it. Okay. Here's what I would say that I want ruckus makers to remember, and that is the work that we get to do. We should never forget that being an educator, we're in the people business, and that's a blessing. It's an opportunity, and it's honestly a chance to change the world one conversation at a time. So never overlook any conversation that we're having with an adult in our school, and never overlook a conversation we're having with a kid in our school, because that could very well be the conversation that changes the world.
Awesome.